Saying, what's the shape of the problem of policing in
it's
America?
like a
Because
Nicki
you raised your
Minaj
hand,
or
so
like
go ahead, tell me.
So the issue that I have with the police in the United States is there appears to be this culture of you must respect the police regardless, but the police don't seem to have any respect for the general public as a whole in most situations. This doesn't seem to be like a uniform issue with all police officers, but there does appear to be some police officers that kind of get a little bit of a power trip, don't necessarily understand the laws so much as understand that they're supposed to be obeyed at all times. And that's my general concern overall.
All right, so mine would basically be that I think overall cases involving the police are justified, and that we only care about very select cases that are very, very horrific and bad. And I level with people there, I get it, but because we only hear about those things and not about a lot of what actually goes on in police work, 700,000 police officers, people are advocating for change in not just socially, but even in law and like stuff like that. And so it's affecting a broader sense of the police force in general.
Okay, so let me try to put that rephrase that to make sure I understand what you're saying is that you're saying that you're concerned about the direction of the police because people are criticizing the police. In other words,
No.
they're getting media stories about things that the police are doing, and they're awfully sensational, and so people are reacting in a way, they're overreacting, and bringing demands for policy change, etc. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're reacting from a small subset of information and advocating for policy change, which
because people are very
I
critical of the
think
police because of those very sensational stories, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so what's happening is that everybody's criticizing the police, and that's having an adverse effect on policing, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it can subjectively change the police, but like the thing is that I think sorry, again, it's not black and white, so
So the problem isn't
like
with policing; it's the way that people are talking about policing. My
Can I give
question
my
was,
criticism on the police?
yeah,
Okay, so I have my great aunt. This was or my great uncle, I guess. This was definitely like years ago, but he was it was like a routine traffic stop, and he was stuffed into a fucking a police what is it? In the back of the car. Someone help me, please.
Paddy wagon.
No, you have a car, and what's in the back of the car?
Trunk.
Trunk, yeah, he was stuffed inside of a trunk. Like
shit.
if I wanted to, I could pull up that story of like he was arrested, and then because he was Native American, and at the time, a lot of people, and especially in Minnesota, were racist towards Native Americans, so they just said, "Ah, you're drunk," whatever. They threw him in the back, and I feel like especially it applies today. Like a lot of cops feel like they can be way more aggressive towards people they feel as a threat than they actually are, and that's my thing.
They can because people with money don't sue. So that's just the nature of
people without money.
If you're a poor minority, you're not going to sue the cops if they mistreat you.
I don't know how true this is because we've seen plenty of cases in which people without a lot of means or people from lower socioeconomic status win a really large payouts from cities.
Does it bother anybody that the Supreme Court seems to have decided that the police are not under any obligation to put themselves in harm's way to protect the community?
Are you talking about?
I think that's
that's the biggest thing. I'm about to make a fucking.
I don't think they should be obligated to. I really don't think they should because it's too hard to.
Budget. You think, oh, they're not doing that. Like, what are they doing? I want to see like an itemized list.
Are you talking about?
I mean, would you put yourself in front of a bullet?
It depends on the situation. I don't think anyone should be obligated by the Supreme Court to do it.
I'm asking King William.
Answers to right-wing problems. I didn't
No, wait,
say.
I'm just asking King
No,
William.
I didn't say
Are
put
you willing?
400
Wait, wait,
I
wait.
didn't say
Are you
put 400
willing? No, wait. I'm asking you. Are you willing to put yourself in front of a
Just wait
bullet?
till I'm done. I'm not
Oh my
responsible for
lord.
putting 400 million guns into the hands of people into civilians' hands in the United States. I did not have anything to do with that. And then the answer,
You
but that's
personally.
what I'm saying. There's always
That
a
has nothing to do with my
right-wing solution to a right-wing problem. Okay, answer your question.
My question was, are you willing to put yourself in front of a bullet if you were a police officer? King
So
William.
then tell me what they're going to do. Tell
No,
me what they are left
that
doing.
doesn't. You asking a question to my question that makes absolutely no sense.
No, I absolutely would not. And they don't, and so they're excused from it, and that means that people can go
So
into
some of them
our
feel the
schools and
same
shoot
way.
them.
They're not
Some of those.
excused from
They
it.
shouldn't be police officers.
Some of those
The
police.
Supreme Court legally can't. The Supreme Court legally can't obligate someone go into harm's way. Like legally, they can't.
Well,
course
that's
they
the
can.
argument they made. That's Scalia's argument.
Hold on. Of course
They
they can.
can't.
We can send people to a fucking war zone. Obviously,
do
we can
that
put
all
them
the
in
time.
harm's way. Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Wait.
But you can't do it,
Well,
please.
there's a
Wait.
Why
There's
can't
a
you-
Why
difference.
not? We
You can
can.
do
We
it.
There's
can
a
just write
difference,
the
though,
law
Brian,
saying we can.
when it comes
There's
to
so much
military
discretion
versus
involved.
police.
There's a discretion involved. You never prove it in a court of
Military
law whether it
weapons
was
in
like
civilian hands. They have military weapons in civilian hands,
But
so you're going to need
that's going to a
military
war
training
zone.
to do that. And that's the
Military
problem
weapons
with
in
flooding the
civilian hands.
population with guns. But the point is,
That's
if the
not a
police are not
policing
going to do
result.
it, then what are we paying their huge budgets for? What's the
Oh.
big budget for?
That's-
So
So
they can
one
look
second,
at-
to buy the equipment and the training that they
second.
do need.
One second.
Hold,
Hey, 1 second. But previously, Doobie had his hand up. I did not get to him. I apologize, Doobie. I didn't mean to skip you like that.
Well, so I
Dude,
honestly,
I
I
have
think
to
that
leave. I just wanted to say, good talking to you guys tonight. I have to take off. Thanks. Sorry.
Thanks for being here,
Bye.
Brent.
Thanks for being here, buddy.
Yeah.
Inspiring.
See you guys.
All right.
I'm gonna be totally
Brandon.
real with you guys. Okay, I feel like 90% of you have like 2 IQ takes on the topic, and we've gone through everything you're gonna say like 1,000 times. And I was wondering if I could bring on something that might be more interesting.
Okay.
Oh, wanting to change the topic. Yeah. All right, you
Well,
guys.
there
Take care.
are 2 things. Goodbye, sir.
Goodbye.
And I saw you talk about
Yeah.
it. It's okay. Okay, bye-bye. 2 things. 2 potential things. Either the drag the kids to Pride thing, which I brought up earlier on the panel we didn't talk about.
Drag the kids to Pride.
Yeah, it's they had like a drag queen burlesque-ish show in front of a bunch of kids at a gay bar.
Was there nudity?
Let's talk about that later. Let's talk about that one later. I'd rather use it for something else. Go ahead.
Yeah, or the other thing is I'm kind of curious because I'd consider the stuff some of you guys are saying on here to be like bullshit, right? Some of the stuff you guys about like the narrative you guys are painting. But I understand that using bullshit to spin in a narrative can be really useful, right? Might
Being a right winger, I'm sure you fully understand that. Yeah.
So I was watching the Discovery Channel like 4 or 5 days ago or some shit. With my
Shark Week
girlfriend,
on?
right?
What?
No, well, I was watching with my girlfriend, and we this show came on called The Book of Queer, right? And it was all about historical figures that were allegedly gay or bi or non-binary or whatever, and they proceeded to like.
Was it a TV show?
Yeah, it's on Discovery Channel.
Did Texas try to ban it because it had book in the name or no?
Come on. Let him finish.
Okay, anyway, I'm letting you go.
So they started to push like really
Cool.
ahistorical bullshit. Right? For example, that Abraham Lincoln was actually gay, right? And he hated his wife because she wasn't a man. Or that Joan of Arc was actually a trans person or like non-binary, right? And not just a woman that was wearing men's clothing. She was actually like non-binary, and she's like a queer hero now, right? And I understand that they're inserting this agenda into history, right? These identities into history where they aren't. It's not real, right? And teaching
It
this
might
to
be
people.
satire, Doobie.
No, it's not satire. They're teaching this to people as fact. They have historians come on, activist historians come on, and speak as if it's the truth. And I wonder how much you guys think that's okay. Like, is it okay to lie about history, to suit a narrative like this, to promote the idea that gay people have always been around? Some of the most popular leaders ever in history were actually gay or non-binary or trans, and we just didn't know it.
So,
how do you feel about ancient aliens? Because this is
Well,
the
I
same.
think this is
I'm
on the
actually
level of
on.
Ancient Aliens, to be honest.
This is the same group, right? Like I think the identity, like we can all say,
No, that's the History Channel. I'm not sure, unless
well,
you're
it's
saying they're owned by them.
History Channel, TLC, Discovery. They're all in, or there used to be another one. They're all owned by
Nat
the same.
Geo, freaking gross.
They're all owned by the same group, and this is why like
It's on my
all these
Fox now,
channels at
Nat
the same
Geo.
time started doing a pivot versus like these swamp creatures and these things, is because simply they earn more money based off this information. So like I think there's an interesting thing when it comes down to the whole historical aspect of like LGBTQ people, right? Is that there are some people that exist that are known individuals for various things who were gay, right? Trans, it's like you can make an argument that this person was actually trans. I forgot there was someone who was a woman who lived their entire life showing themselves to be a man simply so they can continue practicing their thing. But they even went on, they had like a lesbian, or like they had a girlfriend and everything, but they're like born, but they pretend to be a man because of this issue. But like it's regardless, right? It's like, so it's interesting to explore these concepts of these people who possibly had to be in the closet for whatever identity they had, right?
Right.
But I agree, where it's just like Abraham Lincoln, like I don't know about that dog at all. Like where are you getting into? I don't know enough about Joan of Arc, and I would be honest. I honestly would be
I think
surprised.
that's
you
what
So
would
you
for the
even
long,
know Joan
so
of
for a
Arc
long
to be able to
time,
jump.
so but okay, this is not the first time I've heard that Abraham Lincoln might have been gay. This is like a theory that's
Really?
been out there for a while. Yeah, this is not this program making this up. Like now, whether it's true or not, I can't fucking
Right.
tell. I can't adjudicate that. But this idea that there are a few individuals, like okay, the Joan of Arc thing,
Seems reasonable.
it seems reasonable. I think it's like,
No, it doesn't.
well, from well, hold on, looking at that time, right? In that era, there is no way that especially in the country, there's no way that a person like Joan of Arc would have described herself as non-binary, right? Or maybe even trans, if that's indeed what this person was. But that doesn't mean that their feeling wasn't there, right? That if they had gender dysphoria, for instance, that they didn't have that. So like it's I don't think it's unreasonable to look at history with our greater or rediscovered understanding of sexuality, honestly, and make some inferences, especially if you have any sort of historical data, right? Like maybe some writings that might lead you along that way, and say, hey, that's something that you can. Okay, you can imagine that a person who's describing a trans experience, right? Like written it down, describing it, but in language language that is old, right? Language and a context that we are not in. That a historian, a cis white male historian, looking at that transcript might miss, right? You might think, oh, well, they're talking about something else, right? They're talking about, they're talking about transformations, right? And not being their true self. Oh, maybe it's because they thought they should have been king or something, right? Or they had a bad dream, whatever the fuck, right? They could miss that context. This happens all the time, where historians with their own perspective, and it's not like necessarily like a race thing or anything like that, right? It's just that they're locked in their own perspective and their own context, and so they're looking at something, and even they don't understand it, and then it takes a fresh set of eyes looking at that exact same words to say, hey, there might be something you missed here. So I'm not saying that Joan of Arc was trans. I'm not saying that they were non-binary, but I don't think it's ridiculous to be able to like infer from their behavior, right, and maybe other historical documents, that they might have been, and that other historians who weren't, who were cis, didn't think to include that because that's not their experience.
Yeah, so I understand that, yeah, but that's not what's happening, right? So for the Joan of Arc thing, for example, so the idea that she's non-binary is pulled from the fact that she wore male clothing and cut her hair short, right? But there's no indication whatsoever that she ever attempted to pass as like a man or called herself a man or a male. She's a devout Catholic. I think she eventually got married to a man, and when she was arrested, when she was arrested for cross-dressing. The way that she explained this, which makes sense because she was on the battlefield is that women's clothing back then was like dresses and shit, but she was on the battlefield as a soldier and she couldn't wear that. It wasn't practical for her to wear that kind of clothing because she was on the battlefield. So she wore male clothing. The long hair is not practical if you're a woman on the battlefield, right? So they're extracting from that she's non-binary or trans, which is total bullshit. There's nothing they can point to in any of her writings ever that would indicate that she's either of those things.
But
right?
you don't think you could interpret it a different way, right?
Yeah, you could if you were being dishonest and making inferences about her her wearing male clothing.
Look, history is incredibly
your political
difficult
agenda.
because I don't think it's necessarily fair to sit here and say that somebody who believes, if they say that they're non-binary, in this case, they have a different, whatever that label of that time would have been, they have a thought of what is outside the gender norm, and they understand that the penalty for doing that is death, so they come up with a quote-unquote excuse of saying, no, I was out there on the battlefield helping soldiers survive, so I dress like this so they don't fucking die. You don't think that seems like a legitimate thought process?
You don't think tomboys existed in the feudal age? Like, does that
hold on, just Doobie.
Wait, hold on. So yeah, I think that's a legitimate thought process.
Okay.
That could happen. But given that there's no indication that this happened here, it seems like bullshit to make up this story.
Or it could seem like an understanding of some, like what Prime had just sat there and said. As somebody, as a cis white male who only understands like, oh, this person, because at the time women weren't allowed to serve in combat, even though she was a female, she felt this deep need to go out there and fill a male role.
She had visions. She was insane.
Maybe she worked on the farm. You don't know that.
So anyways,
she had visions from
going
God.
through, like I'm a historian, and I had just read this passage and understanding what the gender norm was at the time and why she decided to break that, you could understand as somebody who is non-binary when they read that story and they sit here and say, hey, this is possible. You don't believe that seems to be like a bridge too far?
Possible versus true is like a far bridge to cross.
But
right?
some of the states, like I'm reading the Wikipedia on Joan of Arc, and they unironically have a cross-dressing section of her where they like, and I haven't verified the sources of it, right? But generally, Wikipedia warriors here, and it's saying she didn't give any practical reason at all for cross-dressing. Like when they got captured, she's like she literally called up to like God, like I'm doing this for like the gods, right? Like I'm gonna link it, right? But this isn't lining up with whatever you're saying.
So, like, we have to look at what the word non-binary, like, non-binary is a relatively new concept. It's a relatively, like, new meaning. And, like, to have an experience outside of the normal, traditional one of the two gender roles is kind of non-binary. And, again, to look at things from a historical perspective and to look at Joan of Arc and go, did she have a traditionally female, like, experience in her life? Or did she have kind of a peculiar, like, in-between sort of this, sort of that kind of a lifestyle? And I think it would be fair to say that from a modern perspective, looking back at Joan of Arc, she had a very non-binary experience. And to say that she would identify as non-binary, again, the word didn't even exist. The concept wasn't in society, would have been a sin, would have been punishable by death, all of the above. But from a modern perspective, looking back at it, this kind of looks like a non-binary person.
Could be. I mean, judging by the line that Salsa just put in here, you might run into some problems, right? As far as like at 361, she stated she would return to wearing women's clothes when she fulfilled her calling, right? So like there are inferences here that can be made by if you put somebody on trial and say you will be if you are, you know.
Can you finish that sentence, please?
Well, that was the rest of the sentence.
That was it.
For her calling, as she exposed herself as a warrior, and men's clothes were more practical.
You're reading a different line.
I mean, you also have to think about it.
It's on the cross-dressing section of the Wikipedia.
You have to think about it too. Also, during that era and time, that women were not accepted as soldiers, so she
exactly
wanted to fight. So she had to wear men's armor.
Right, as she's fulfilling a male role, she's outside what we consider the gender norm or the gender binary at that time.
So is everybody.
I think we can take a
some dudes like fucking ice skating. Like, that doesn't make them non-binary.
No,
So I'm
I
asking
think
you. So I'm asking you. Do you guys think it's okay? So if there's a possibility here, all of you guys I think would agree that there's no confirmation from her, from any of her writings anywhere, that she felt like a man or felt non-binary, right? So given that's the case, and just a possibility existing, do you think it's reasonable to present this as fact because it helps suit a political narrative to like push the LGBT whatever the fuck agenda?
I don't
To
know.
normalize that line of thinking.
you have to be careful, right? Because we already caught you on being wrong on something. So
No,
now
you
your
didn't.
entire
Right out the
yes,
gate.
yes, I did. I
No,
100%.
literally right out of
No, shut up. I'm speaking.
It wasn't there. I read it out.
I'm
Go ahead,
talking.
hon.
You said
Go
the
ahead,
reasons that
please.
you gave were not the reasons that she's quoted in this Wikipedia, right? And this is like
It's
something where
literally right there.
either
He literally read it for her.
the show
Let him
gave
finish,
you
let him
incorrect information, right? Or you like gave me correct information
Do you
and
want me
you
to screenshot
misremembered it from the show.
Wikipedia?
Regardless, right? Like regardless, I think it's there's not any like true harm. If the show was saying Joan of Arc is trans, is non-binary,
Right.
making those statements, that's horrible. That's wrong. No one should do that when going back, unless she's like, hey, I created this concept called non-binary and I fit it, right? Unless she made that proclamation there, right? But it for people who don't have an understanding of these concepts, just like hey, this person might have suffered from bipolar disease back in like 1400s when they didn't know it because of their erratic behavior and everything, or they may have had autism. Like this is an interesting concept. They had no like name for it, but we could see this stuff based off their behavior, and it's like let's explore it a little bit and talk about it. If they're saying definitive, I agree with you. It is wrong, but I'm willing to bet they're not saying definitive, and they're probably exploring this concept, exploring this idea, and it's not wrong to explore this idea and concepts of this.
They are saying in this case and in the Abraham Lincoln case.
Was Einstein autistic?
I
Oh
don't
God,
know.
I don't know. Like you'd have to, Doobie, if you want to show us or clip us the film, yeah, that'd be fine. But as far as like having the political discussion of like, is it wrong to push an agenda? I don't know. Like, is it okay for gay people to look back and say like, hey, Alexander the Great was bisexual? I think that's somebody that we should point at and be like, hey, this is a good person, regardless of like viewing the slaughtering of people or whatever, right? Like it would be fine. I don't know the relevance of it, but people like to celebrate people that are of their same
That's not what
how they identify.
Actually bi or gay people in history, that's fine. I don't give a fuck about that. I'm talking about where they take this possibility that they've extracted from Joan of Arc, for example, and said, hey, she wore male clothing. We're going to remove the context of the reason she's saying that she's doing this is until she fulfills her duty. Her duty is winning a war. She's a warrior, and male's clothing is more practical in war. Keeping her hair short is more practical in war. So yeah, of course she's going to be wearing male clothing with her hair short. She never presented as a male. Right? So yeah, we're going to ignore all that context.
Isn't that presenting as a male?
Because she wore the pins and short hair, well, that actually means she might be non-binary. And because she might be non-binary, we're going to say she actually definitely is non-binary.
I got to see the actual context of this show and see how they present this. Kind of makes it difficult.
If I was
Prime, we should do like a watch thing on Friday with this, okay?
Maybe we should. That might actually be fun.
I don't think
let's
it's
go
that
to.
difficult
I want to let our friend Kobe in really quickly. Then we'll go to Jacob. And then Buddy, do you have your hand up? Okay.
This is like one of my favorite topics, to be 100% honest. Like I really love talking about like historical depictions of sexuality and stuff. Just to very briefly, I don't I wouldn't call myself a gay man necessarily, a queer man. Not a big fan of the Alexander the Great kind of thing. Bogaius was a boy slave. For those of you who don't know, Alexander the Great had a boy slave who was his lover named Bogaius. He really loved him. He made a bunch of statues about him. It was a big thing. There's a book
talking about the relation. There was him, and then I thought he had a relationship with like his.
So the reason I'm quoting this guy is because there's a book I'm linking right now called the Persian Boy, which was it's a really popular book amongst gay men that was released in the 70s or 60s, and it's about Alexander the Great and one of his relationships with the boy. Point I'm making is it's just I think there's a little bit too much overtly pedophilic overtones in that situation, and a lot of this to kind of say that this is a good example of LGBT relationships in history. I do kind of want to let the conversation kind of flow a little bit more because I kind of saw that there was a kind of stuff going on. So just to give my perspective here briefly, there was an event that happened in the West that a lot of people kind of forget happened, which is called the sexual revolution. We have a very different sexual ethics in the modern West than we did 100 years ago, and then in any other time in history. I don't really think it's, the more that I read history, it's just not really accurate to say that like any modern interpretation of queerness existed in, let's say, like this, just an example, like the let's say, the pre-colonial world in like the Americas, because the idea of queerness has to have that sexual revolution, this idea of an individualized open sexuality to even be a thing. Now, if you want to just say, well, did homosexuality exist? Well, yeah, obviously,
Right.
homosexuality exists in animals and all kinds of, in all kinds of animals, all kinds of societies. I'm a little bit more interested to talk about maybe how homosexuality and just more broadly non-heterosexual relationships and non-gender conforming social roles existed. But I'm skeptical of the idea that queerness, non-binary people, for example, the idea of like transgenderness, these kind of things, people will try to find these historical examples. People, I know, two-spirit is an example. There's a couple other Native American terms that I can't speak off the top of my head because I don't know the pronunciations. That when you look into it, it becomes inextricable that these roles existed in the context of the societies they existed in. They weren't
Right, of course.
necessarily a transgender person. They were a category that only can exist in, let's say, ancient Comanche society. That we have like a parallel in the same way that there's the chieftain was kind of like the president, but it's bare bones. And just to kind of answer the idea of fiction, though, I would say in fiction, this should be the place that we do whatever we want, right? To some extent, right? I think historical fiction. I don't watch it as much, but there's another show, Vikings, and I know in the newest season there's a character that's a black Viking who's supposed to be like the daughter of like a slave from North Africa. Is like the statistical chance of that being historically likely very high? Well, no, that's a pretty unlikely curse of events. But like that, it's a historical fantasy show or fiction show. That's the point of fiction. We're supposed to like think of a
There was a black
thing.
Viking. I think there were black Vikings though.
Oh sure, but this specific person is an invented person.
Okay,
but regardless, I just want to say like that to me, like I like historical fiction. That's the point of this. Like it's cool to think about like what would a Roman legionary think about shogunate era Japan? What would a Comanche chief think about? Blah, blah. That is the point. That's the whole point. So if there's a show that wants to analyze Joan of Arc through modern contemporary gender roles, that's the point of historical fiction, I guess I would say. If it's trying to present itself as historical fact, that becomes hard. But also that I think that the line between historical fact and historical fiction in something that is historical fiction is difficult to deal with. Like,
so let's
how do you? Oh, sorry.
Didn't Doobie say it was facts? He told me it was facts.
No, I didn't say it was fact. I'm saying it, they're presenting it as fact. That's my issue with it.
Oh,
it's not they're exploring the idea.
It's like a thought experiment. Like thought experiments are healthy.
No, it's not.
Fantasy and thought experiments are not healthy. Weird.
They're not presenting it as a thought experiment. They're saying, hey, this person was definitely gay. This person was definitely non-binary.
I want to hear. Okay, so Jacob has been waiting, so I want to get to Jacob and then Buddy. And just so I know, Kobe, I really want to discuss this with you. I'm not sure I won't have time enough in the context of this, but I would really like to pick your brain about this because I have
it's Pride Month. It's Pride Month. We have a whole month opportunity to do it.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Actually,
well, Jacob, please.
I would love to hear more from you as well, dude. I'm interested in it. Can I, Doobie, was I correct in hearing that from the same Wikipedia that Salsa brought up, you found a line that said that she dressed that way for the battlefield?
Yeah, so she said that she would. You know what? I forgot to bring this up earlier, right? It's in the that's in the cross-dressing section, but she literally called herself the maid, right? In like French, like la Pucelle.
Yeah.
So like she wasn't trying to present herself as a male.
Someone else made this statement for her.
But okay, so to be clear, she called herself the maid.
I'm now reading this document, right, which was done by the PhD, right, with some Susan Crane from Rutgers, right, back in 1980s, right. So this isn't something that was done recently for modern times. The document that I'm reading that I referenced in the VC chat was done in 1980, so way before all this stuff. Right, and this is where they're getting this information. Right, Joan of Arc continued to wear out of the battlefield during her trial as part of like wearing men's clothing, right, and referred to herself as like some like a French term that was like neither male nor female, but it was an idea of she was brought from God to save the French people, right? So. Like I'm still reading this big ass article. I'm probably not going to finish it. I'm taking
the maid, the woman. Yeah.
So it's not out of the question that
someone else said this on her behalf. Jean G. Right? It's in the first part of that sentence that you.
Wait, hold on. Someone else didn't call her the maid. She called herself the maid. She called herself the maid. That was what she called herself.
Yeah, I'm reading an article where it says that she called herself Jean
She wasn't like trying to separate herself from the idea of gender.
Maid. I don't know about the
Because
maid claim.
we're talking about a person who was speaking in 15th century French. Like, and like I'm not really sure if we can understand what the significance of a third gender pronoun term could possibly mean.
So you're triggered by the context, Doobie, or are you triggered by the way they?
I'm triggered by the claim that she's definitely non-binary.
So
no, it's not. It's not saying definitive. I'm just saying like the concept of instantly throwing out all of these things is like preposterous. That's it.
It's a single thing, and again, when she says, "Hey, I'm going to dress like this," she didn't dress like that for the majority of her life. She cut her hair and whatnot right before after she had these visions and shit. And she said, "I'm going to dress like this until my calling is done." Right, and the calling was winning the war. She was a warrior, and it made sense for her as a warrior to dress in a certain way.
Jacob, is there a time frame on being
sorry. Jacob was talking, and then everyone interrupted him. Jacob, please.
Yeah, no, I brought up that fact because and as I let everything continue to prove what I was thinking even more is the fact that, like, since you guys can sit here and it's so highly debated and there's so many things swinging both ways, or like, it's not about saying what if, it's the fact that, like, if you have a show that's definitely saying that, like, through an agenda, let's be honest, that a person is factually by like, you know, binary or whatever, or non-binary, like, it should be labeled as entertainment. It shouldn't be stating fact or history, especially if, like, you know, a quick Google search can, like, bring up reasons pretty easily on, like, maybe this isn't true. Like, if it's that fast, like, it seems pretty unsubstantiated.
It's fake news.
Shouldn't be. I mean, it could be a thought experience. It could be, again, I agree. It could be Ancient Aliens. Go have fun. If you're non-binary, or if you're like, you want to watch this kind of content, that's great. It should just be labeled as entertainment, unless you have really good factual proof that you're right. But in this case, it seems very. It doesn't seem like that's true. So
okay. So I someone else in chat, thank you, Old Decker, I think found the thing that Doobie was talking about. I'm going to, you guys aren't going to be able to see this, but I want you to be able to hear it, right? So I'm going to play the trailer for this thing, and we're going to make some inferences from the fucking trailer, okay? I'm going to try to link this fucking thing. If I can do this shit.
Cringe. Before you do it, just really quickly, while you're setting it up, another big problem I have is the way that they present these people. It's like hypersexualized. Like, if Abraham Lincoln were a gay guy, he had his ass out 24/7, was looking for a cock 24/7. And so they're playing into that stereotype about, like, LGBT people just being like total hedonist fucking pleasure freaks, right? Like, it's so in both ways it's fucked.
Like,
I can't get it to show up, so you're not going to see the video, but, like, hopefully you guys can hear it, right? So I'm going to play this thing, and we're going to see, like, the tone they're using, okay?
If you want to learn about the world's queer, exciting truth, we'll help you dig it up like an academic sleuth. Hidden in these pages are stories fit for stages that inform us and engage us, shine a light on the dark ages. Outrageous and courageous, and we promise that it rages!
Girl, don't be a tease. Spill some tea.
Okay, you thought Mayor Pete was one of a kind. Well, he wasn't even the first. Abe Lincoln was a queer commander-in-chief. A secret that's ready to burn. Think trans rights started in 2010? Well, my friends, you better think again. Trans activists want to be here. You'll learn all about it in the Book of Queer.
Okay, keep going, Broadway.
All right, computers, high fives, King James Bible, and putting Nazis in their place. All because of
Antifa.
our queer legends, plus NASA's first woman in space. In the Renaissance, you better believe Michelangelo stroked more Adam than Eve. There's more to see and hear in the glamorous pages of the Book of Queer.
This sounds delightful.
I wanna binge it till unfold.
Who will be on the show? Anyone that we know? Check out that rainbow. We'll be stacked with notable queens, historians emeritus, brilliant people who use the letters LGBTQ and plus. Comedians, actors, and artists too. A Cambridge PhD who's super cute.
Oh my god, that's so nice of you. But honestly, it's all about skincare.
I would love to hear more about this because you have gorgeous skin, but we don't have the time, you beautiful genius. We have to hit the grand finale. Poetry from a place called Lesbos, Egypt's gender-bending pharaohs, queen behind a king and hero, secret life of gay baseball pro, Joan of Arc, non-binary, guess who's dating our first ladies? The book of queer. Each show ends with a song you'll want to sing along.
Honey, just watch the show already.
Okay. I hope you guys were able to make that out. I put the link in BC chat, and I'll copy the link again. Again, thank you, Old Decker. Old Decker was the one who found this. And you'll find the trailer there. If looking at the trailer, it looks a bit more damning than like more in line of what Doobie was trying to say, in that like they were saying everything is fact. Okay, so you guys didn't see what I saw, right? So if you didn't watch the trailer, let me try to describe it for you.
It sounded really good. That's all I know.
It was obviously very musical, but they were also like juxtaposing people from recent history who were gay. For instance, they got Russell fucking he was part of the civil rights movement. He worked with Martin Luther King. Was it Bertrand Russell or something like that? I forget. I think I got the wrong name.
Gandalf?
Not Gant. What are you talking about? No. So no. But anyway, there was an individual. Fuck. I hate that I can't remember his name.
Harvey Milk?
No. He was black, African American, who worked with Dr. K. He helped plan like the Million Man March.
Bayard Rustin.
Bayard Rustin. Thank you so much. Like, so they put him in that trailer, right? And he was gay. Right, he was a person in recent context. But going back to what our friend Kobe said previously, right? Kobe talked about like, well, there's like a longer context, right, into the past. So they were also putting in people within this trailer, and they had like a whole list of names that apparently we're going to talk about in the Book of Queer, people who were LGBT, but talking about like pharaohs, right? Pharaohs who were like, gender bending.
Oh,
and
they
stuff.
were
So,
definitely gay.
So check out that trailer yourself, so you can actually see it. That will help you understand what we're dealing with here. But I think there might be something to what Kobe's trying to say, in that, like, yes, you can say like Bayard Rustin was gay because he said he was gay, and we know he's gay. He's a gay hero, and gay kids should know about him, right? But then looking far back in the past, it's a lot harder to tell. Like, is a gender bending pharaoh? Like, what exactly does that mean in that context? So check out at least the trailer there. So it's like 2 minutes long. Check it out. Okay, go ahead.
Really fast.
I was right as usual. Fuck you guys.
So I will speak to that.
I'm surprised that you said
the problem is with,
I watched the entire fucking thing. Okay.
I will speak to that. Like,
I'm gonna watch
in
every
ancient
episode.
history, like the way that gender has worked and the way that traditional relationships have worked has like changed and evolved and adapted a lot. The idea of like monogamy, where like we get married to one person, we stay married to that one person like for our entire lives, is like a relatively new concept when we're talking about the scale of like human history. Things have adapted and changed and been experienced in a lot of different ways in a lot of different times. And of course, we usually hear about like the coupling of the people that produced the children that passed on the lineage that did the thing. But like what people are doing in their own time and in various places and wherever is like something else that occurs. And again, in Greek culture, in ancient Greek culture, in ancient Egyptian culture, in ancient Mesopotamian and Babylonian cultures, in ancient Chinese and Japanese cultures, there's a wide variety of different sexual expressions that have come up at different times. And in reference to Joan of Arc, again, there is a very heavy like constraint on like the activities people could do. There was a lot of like Inquisition and things like that going on, people getting executed. As a matter of fact, Joan of Arc was executed for like something very much in line with these very like same things. And again, to look at things from a more liberated viewpoint in modern era and then try to create like a framework. I do see them making a lot of very broad claims, though. But I think that some of them might be well-deserved or rational, potentially.
It just seems satirical and like just like a thought experiment, is it not? Or
I don't think it's
No,
satirical.
Like if
They're
yeah, like
presenting
that,
this as, like,
especially that
fact.
trailer. Who's falling for that, thinking like that's actually like real?
yeah, it's like fucking Disney wacky
serious?
woohoo, and it's like
They're presenting it
Well-
as like they're teaching. They have like actual
come on, they got like
historians on the show.
They have fucking
No, they're
zoos
doing
in the
it-
goddamn trailer.
I
Let's
think
be
the
Doing,
fact
no, no,
that
no.
they
They're
had-
doing it
I
in
heard
a fun
kazoo
way.
or two on
This
the.
is for this is for kids. This is for children, and they're doing it, trying to do it in a fun, engaging way, right? So that's where the song and dancing comes in.
I hope it's
And
for children?
it's a very colorful trailer too, right? I from what I've seen there, right, and I haven't seen anything of like the show other than this trailer, right? But if I'm going off of that, it seems like Doobie is correct that they're pushing this as necessarily fact rather than like, I don't know, this is some interesting things about these people in the past that draw your own conclusions, right? Go ahead, Kobe.
Okay, I'm sorry. The deflection that this is like a not serious thing is in and of itself like homophobic. Why is queer history to be relegated
Right.
to a fucking
It's
kazoo?
not queer.
It sounds like fucking meme, like wacky, wacky world memes. Like, if they're gonna do if they're gonna do a historical documentation, like, what's the point? Why wrap it up?
Because
in
they're trying to have fun with kids. I don't know why this is that simple, right?
I don't
Like,
know if this
they
is
want to
made
get
for
kids to
children,
engage
though.
with
It's
this
not.
thing.
It's just it's a thought experiment. There's no way.
This is
it says that
why
in
do
the
they
article.
have a child like
I'll
play
watch it.
Joan
I'll
of
watch
Arc
it.
and,
I'll be right
and pretend armor? Like, just look at it.
Okay, I just want to say that like this is not saying. Okay, hold on. I just want to say I had a whole quote. There's a quote from one of my favorite authors, David Graeber, who says, "The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something that we make, and that we could just as easily make it differently." That is the goal, in my opinion, of finding examples of gender nonconforming and different sexualities in history to show to young people and to show to young gay people. Is to show that not necessarily that the stereotype of the person, the sex-obsessed gay person that just wants to fuck everybody, that has existed since forever, and there were people on the Isle of Thebes having sex with each other. That is not necessarily what I think needs to be the message. The message should be is that other societies have constructed themselves in ways in which people have expressed themselves and have lived in that society in different ways. And that just because you live in a society that tells you that there's an aspect of your personality, an aspect of your life that they think should be relegated to this, that, or the other place, doesn't necessarily need to be that way. That's the message, in my opinion. This show, in my opinion, is promoting the idea that a very commercialized, commodified gay queer identity has existed for forever. And it is literally people like, I mean, every single example is like, they literally like, I'm sorry, they're like laying in bed about to have sex, or it's talking about which person they want to stroke more. Like, I'm sorry, like I can at least at least like
I don't know.
I don't know. Like the last thing I want to say
children.
is like last thing I want to say. Well, I don't care about that part as much. I mean, I care about that, but that's not my main focus. The focus I would say is the stereotyping of gay people is my biggest gripe with this.
Yeah, sure.
There is a whole sect of gay people, a whole sect of queer people called asexual people, in which the idea of who they want to stroke is actually completely irrelevant to them. And to them, there's zero ace representation here. And I think that this is just an example. This is not a product that is authentically an example of like queer identity. It's a very commodified gay identity. Let's be honest. This is for white women. Let's be honest. Who's going to watch this? Let's be honest with ourselves. For white women, who watches fucking these gay shows?
What?
What?
Okay,
This for white women?
just seems.
Yeah.
Hella. Just as in my opinion.
Not everything is made for white women. I think
It's not made
there are
for it, but
plenty
yeah, a big demographic, at least to Prime, in my opinion, at least of these kind of like of shows that are kind of about like of like queer eye for the straight guy kind of stuff is like are like women. I put white there because honestly I wanted to.
Did this ever come
Well,
out?
because some of these things are going to be like those groups are in line with one another, right? Like they seem or they may enjoy those same types of things. Queer are for the straight guy, right? Well, it's for one, queers, right? And then for two, women like fashion and enjoy the idea of like,
sprucing up their straight
skincare
guys
and everything like
So
that.
I
don't
can
know about
confirm.
this idea.
My girlfriend is a white woman. So this actually makes sense. And I was irritated the entire fucking time. She thought it was great, right? She's like, "Oh yeah, Abraham Lincoln's gay," and I'm like, "No, fuck you." It was so fucking annoying. But she ate it right up, right? She loved the music and the colors and the dancing and the buff Abraham Lincoln guy rubbing his ass against the guy in bed. She loved all of it, right? So fucking annoying.
So it's based off of
Why do you
book.
hate what other people? Why do you like hate people?
I hate lots of things
happy
people like. I'm sure you do too.
I don't hate anything.
You don't like that. You don't like that pedophiles like child porn.
I don't like
You
what?
don't hate that. You don't hate that pedophiles like child porn.
There's people have mental issues. Like that's not.
Hey, you don't think it's a bad thing though, right?
I think it's frowned upon in society. I think it's generally a bad thing. Yes, I think it can be problematic. Yes.
Weird. You dislike something someone likes. Creepy.
I don't hate them.
Okay,
I
guys,
don't
I'm
hate
distracted
them.
by this. Buddy, did
I
you want to
don't
add
hate them,
something?
though.
Buddy, did you want to add something? Somebody online?
No. Thank you. I'm caught up at the moment.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So I don't know. So it's a weird show. It's clearly aimed. It seems aimed at a younger audience with the way they're presenting it, right? But the book of
I don't think
mixed
teenagers
on,
would be.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say like if you want to say a younger audience, I don't think it'd be anything
teenagers,
different than like teenagers.
Yeah.
And I think that would
I
be a
agree.
perfectly appropriate, like age appropriate time to talk about homosexuality. I don't see that being a fucking
I
problem.
think you can talk about that even younger. But
Well,
but
possibly,
that's a,
but I
much
guess
younger.
I caution the idea of like this is aimed towards our children to like make them gay. That's where I go.
This is not a.
Yeah, that's when I hear
This is
that
not
of like this is aimed towards our kids. Like I think of like.
No, I think the concern. I think the concern is more about programming the children, teaching them bad information.
It's like
boy relationships.
Stereotypical of gay people. How do you not all notice it? It's unfathomably stereotypical of gay people.
Yep.
That is.
I don't
that,
think
that is the biggest problem.
Sex
it is a
obsessed,
show that depicts. It
fucking
is literally a show that's called the Book of Queer, and the only thing they talk about is how people want to fuck each other, and they're obsessed about how hot each other are. That's the problem.
No, that's not
Yeah,
necessarily the
I agree with
problem.
Kobe. I agree with Kobe because
one of the biggest
it's
problems.
not
I'm not sure
stereotype.
Because the stereotype is actually indicative of what the actual act of homosexuality is, right? Like the theatrical exercise of the difference in between why a homosexual is a homosexual and not a heterosexual is that act. It's theatricized in there because of how it sells.
Yeah, but there's more to homosexuality than the act.
Exactly.
Of course, but as a historical looking.
This is the Book of Queer.
Okay.
Ace people have no representation in a show like this.
Okay. It's not aimed towards ace people at that.
It's not the Book of Queer.
I mean, how do you know that? How do you know it's not aimed at that there's no ace people in there, asexual
I haven't
individuals?
seen the show. It's completely
how do you know that?
Obviously, I can't say that no.
They say LGBTQIA+. That's what they say.
They have a lot of numbers there. I will respect them. They have a lot of numbers in that article. But the point I'm making is that at least aesthetically, a show that is extremely sexualized is not a show that is appealing aesthetically to a group of people, part of the queer, part of the queer community that does not view themselves as sexual and does not.
Okay. I'm not sure if they meant that all that was sexual.
Welcome to the left. You have to.
No. I disagree with that.
Always aligned with
wait a minute. I disagree.
No.
I disagree. That I just watched that trailer as well, and I'm not. And again, all I'm working with is this trailer. I can't make any broad assumptions about this show, right? I just doing my best with this trailer, and it didn't seem like it was just about like them having sex or anything, right? That was something that was talked about, certainly, but just like, hey, these are individuals who embodied this spirit in these different eras.
What's
right?
the spirit?
Well, like people who were, they said like they were talking about trans individuals, like, oh, did you or non-binary? I think it was, right. You think non-binary is new? No. And then they like had like a little animation of like turning back the clock to 1410 BC, right? And like, oh, there's non-binary stuff in there. Not necessarily that people were having sex, but just hey. You can find evidence of non-binary individuals within history or within societies way back when. They're like exploring a lot of different topics here. Some of it is definitely going to be sex. And I don't know if some of it will be asexual, but they said they listed out all the letters there. So I'm assuming
I will concede. I will concede that they talk about non-binary people, and I will concede that non-binary shit is on the web of ace stuff, and it opens the window. They probably have at least one part there. They talk about asexual people. The argument that I'm making is that if you have a book, or if you have a show that's called the Book of Queer, and the way that you're presenting it is, I'm sorry, this is a hypersexualized show.
Yeah,
Abraham
it's
Lincoln
problematic.
is sitting on a bed. That is the stereotypical problematic. That's the stereotypical problematic nature that I am angry. That
What do
I'm
you think
annoyed about.
hypersexual is? This isn't like kink being at fucking pride parades. This is a literal advertisement about queer people in history.
It's hypersexual because other than the example I got, other than the turning back the clock, Abraham Lincoln is like laying in a bed, longing at his lover. There was like another person that was like a person in armor, and they were like longing at their lover. The Thebes guys are like all working out
because
and, like,
you're
going
showing
over each other.
affection in between. Like, gay sex is affectionate. It doesn't mean it's hypersexual.
What it means to be queer is bigger than gay sex, and the fact that gay sex is all that people think about when they think about. Yes, exactly. That's what I'm.
It's
affection. That's the argument that I'm making. Is that this is a incredibly commodified stereotype of gayness that is basically about gay sex, and queer sex, and is overly fixated on that.
Yeah. Okay. Dustin, I posted the Abraham Lincoln segment. I think that's all. I haven't watched it.
The trailer has 4,000 views, and
VC
over
chat.
half of them are probably angry right wingers.
Probably me.
So,
Yeah,
like,
4,000 are me.
8 minutes.
So yeah, just watch that, and that's like you'll see the kind of hypersexual shit I'm talking about.
Has it aired? Or
Like
did
it
go
doesn't
bankrupt?
put them as like normal human beings that happen to be like.
Yeah, he
attracted
said
to
he
me or
watched
something.
it, dude.
It's like
yeah.
Yeah, I
On
watched.
television?
I watched this. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
he's
watched it
like,
on
what?
television.
From the very start, he said that. What? You kept
Yeah, it's on-
badgering about
it's on
that. He said he
Discovery
watched
Plus.
it.
So like television.
So it actually, okay, in modern television.
Yeah.
I mean,
Gotcha.
it's going to be reached to audiences. So yeah, of course.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems a bit. I don't know. Is it history or propaganda? Is it propaganda?
Yeah,
That's what he's discussing.
I don't care.
Well, that's what I was asking.
That's his question. That's his
So
question.
if it is, if this, I think this is bullshit, right? So if it is bullshit, right, does it matter? So if it does help advance like LGBT rights or whatever, and normalize the idea of like queerness in like the next generation is just seeing this kind of shit, is that beneficial enough?
But you see the people do this all the time with Bill Nye, and they do the raps on different people, and it's goofy and silly and stuff like that, and it's not like, you know, it's not lighting a building on fire.
This is a video on Akhenaten, who was a very important pharaoh in Egyptian history. An intersplit between like a video of like some sort of historian talking about it. There's a picture of Akhenaten doing a splits, and you can see like they blur out where you would see his genitals. That is how this is supposed to be like literally one of the most important political figures of all time. And the way the show is depicting him is like literally he's stripping on his throne. If I become the king of America and they find out I'm gay and that's how they depict me, I'm coming back from the fucking grave. I am haunting that society. And there will be a fucking Stephen King like reckoning that happens. That's unbelievable, bro. That's so offensive.
I think you take this is the same. Isn't that the same ideology they have in the Middle East over like Muhammad or whatever? Isn't
You're just trying to web me, bro. You're trying to web.
Isn't it the same ideology?
Are you
think about this?
No, actually, yes. I actually think that you should be flayed because you were talking against Ra, the great sun god. So yes, no, that's ridiculous. I'm not saying you shouldn't be able to depict it.
Okay,
I'm not saying
I'm hearing
this.
something.
I think that this should be able to be. I'm making a joke because you're comparing my position to the idea that you should be killed or address it if you depict Muhammad.
No, I'm just saying you seem very adamant about the portrayal of historical.
Oh my god!
Yes, I'm a queer man.
We're having a debate, Crimson. Like
I'm having a queer man during Pride Month, and this is like a video that came out today in which like one of the most important political figures of all time, Akhenaten, that is like I think he might be in.
Who cares, dude? Nobody's above humor.
Okay,
you're right.
Okay,
you're right,
please just say something really quickly.
You're right.
So I posted a segment of what Kobe's talking about in VC chat, right? It's like a minute into the Akhenaten thing, and immediately he's like in underwear, right? And then it goes like to the throne room scene where he's like grinding up against the statues of dogs and shit. Like, again, this is one of the most important political figures in history.
Yeah.
Why would you take, even if you were gay,
I can't
even
defend
if you
that.
were like a homosexual, you reduce him to just a horny dude rubbing up against statues. Like, what the fuck?
Oh Lord!
Yeah,
I guess you guys
can't-
just didn't like epic rap battles of history because they.
Okay,
make
guys.
fun of, like,
This
I
is
love
not
you.
comparable.
I love you
This
all.
is highly comparable.
I will.
No, it isn't.
I'll send you a message. I would love to go talk about this more. I'm just being honest. You guys are being bad faith. This is ridiculous and actually insane. I think Prime. You're not being bad faith. I think you're being respectable. This is obviously ridiculous. Anybody is going to see a depiction of a gay man, of a gay historical figure grinding on a statue of a dog or whatever. Like, come on. Like,
Dude, you're probably going to leave here and go watch a South Park episode and laugh your head off.
He's dry humping his throne.
You actual imbecile. Yes, I'm going to go watch a parody show that is not depicting itself as a historical show on Discovery Channel, and I'm going to laugh at it. Yes, I'm going to do that.
Do you wait? Do you
this is like on
depicting
Discovery
itself
Channel?
as a historical show?
It's on Discovery Channel, and it says it's literally on the fucking thing.
All right. Did you watch?
Did you watch Ancient Aliens?
I have watched. I've watched two.
They have actual historians.
Let me speak, please, bro.
Go for it.
Go ahead. It is literally. Sure. Please. Okay. In one of the articles I was reading, it quoted a press release from the show in which it said, "Do you want to hear the queer truth of history? Truth of history." It is then in the video. It is structured like
queer truth.
Shut up, please. Yes,
please let him finish.
Queer history. And in the video, it is structured as historians, people that are from universities and are authorities on the subject, talking about the subject, interspliced with videos that look like they could be in a Nicki Minaj video of Akhenaten grinding on an animal. Again, like, this is the level of, okay, I just wanted to that chat. Like the people have gotten to the point they're not even willing to defend it. They're calling into question whether or not it's even being historical. Unbelievable, dog. Unfathomable, bro. Like, I'm sorry. I just want to, Prime, I have a question.
I'm watching this literally right now.
The last thing I didn't want to make this argument because it's like, I think that it's so cringe when people like just do, what about, hypocritical. What if I could find another example? But I think we would all agree that if there was a show that was like depicting like really racist depiction of like an African civilization and like Zulu as being like a savage, people would be like, hey, let's not have Zulu with a bone through his nose. Maybe like we would probably agree that we shouldn't play into stereotypes. Like, I don't know, but hey, I'm not going to hold
it's one of those things because we can run on this, right? Because I honestly wanted to take us this direction or whatever, or like shows depicting like any type of stereotype, or like shows like depicting like The Wire. Are we no longer allowed to watch anything? Because like we're all in agreement. We're all in agreement that flamboyant gay people do exist, right?
Of course, but
yes. Of course. So like this is stereotype. It's just like one of those things. This is literally just entertainment. If you're watching the show from the 8-minute one that I just watched of Abraham Lincoln, over there, literally like it's bad media. And I can go along with you and say like, yes, this is improper like depictions of like gay people, or like it's leaning significantly too heavy on the flamboyant stereotype, and it's not going to have the appropriate representation. Right.
Then what's the disagreement then?
The part that I'm going is that it's not like at least when I'm taking it, right? They're definitely not like, hey, this is 100% historical fact. That's not.
Oh my God. Please, God, please Allah, save me. Please Allah.
All right, let's get past the bullshit. Give me your shit.
Obviously
Come on.
not. Obviously not. And if that's your point, is if you'll concede to me that it's stereotypical and it's relying too much on stereotypes,
sure, it's obviously stereotypical.
The whole argument I'm making, then yes, I'll concede to you that the owner of the show probably say,
what is this?
There are other
stereotypical when you like.
So yes, let's amazing, wonderful discourse. I love you very much, PrimeCayes. Thank you, everybody else, for the conversation.
Let's be retarded.
Jesus Christ,
It's like flamboyant man is being stereotypical. Yes.
People are still going to learn something, even if it's over the top and
was he flamboyant? Hold on. Was
in the Abraham Lincoln one, 100%.
No. He was talking about the other one, the Akhenaten one, right? That's what he was talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure that the level.
Yeah, look at that one. That's what he was talking about.
It would seem like all of them are going to be depicted in this way. It's the purpose of like this type of queer. They're all consistently in the same high level of flamboyant. Right, like this seems to be the purpose of the show, sprinkled in with some historical. I think they had a letter or quote from Lincoln in the Lincoln one. Salsa, maybe you could help me out and watch the whole fucking thing. But like they're taking some quotes and saying actual letter from Abraham Lincoln, or actually said blah 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 blah.
Is it directed at children or no? It's not, is it?
No, I think it's directed to a teenage audience.
I think it's like teenagers, but definitely not kids. No way.
Yeah, teenagers.
So I mean, like, it seemed from what I saw, it seemed, I don't know if it was 100% factual or not, but I mean, I have no problem with doing interesting things to have people learn history. as long as they're not presenting false ideals,
which
right?
is what we're talking about, which is what we're wondering about. That was the crux of the argument, right? That's
So
what
Doobie,
Doobie's-
what's the fault? What's the false? What's
I
your
don't
problem?
know if that
with
was Doobie's argument. I think
We literally just want to. Yeah. So the issue again is if they are presenting this as fact, it seems like at least in the case of Joan of Arc and Abraham Lincoln, it's not fact. It's a possibility that they've extracted from specific details, right? But we don't know it as fact, right? So then presenting it as fact with like actual PhD historians telling you that this is true is a fucking problem to me. In addition to the weird stereotypes and over-sexualization shit.
Yeah, sure, whatever. So the part that the actual historians do go in and say, like, this is fact, this has happened. If we were to say that historically that did happen, but the inference that they're drawing is this does make Abraham Lincoln gay, I would agree with you on that being fucking wrong. But just because, and again, this seems like the weird part of this fucking show, of like, just because this did happen, Lincoln's a pretty easy example. I think historically we're pretty well versed on him. Joan of Arc might be a little bit more difficult. But like the gender non-conforming aspect of Joan of Arc is pretty solidly, I mean, we all agree she's filling a quote-unquote male role during that time. That's pretty gender non-conforming. Now, whether or not that continues, as you keep saying, Doobie, like outside of the battlefield to fulfill that purpose, some people may say
it probably
like,
would, wouldn't it?
I don't
Gender
know.
non-conforming doesn't equal non-binary.
Right. So
not equatable in any way.
Just the fact that she goes out onto the battlefield instead of doing what anyone else was doing at that time means that she's not conforming with the traditional gender role. And I mean, in an extreme way. Like, this is hyper
well,
extreme.
maybe I'm misunderstanding. Was the quote that she was gender non-binary? Oh, okay. I think that would be
they're making
different.
she's non-binary.
Okay, yeah, I would say that would be different than gender non-conforming.
I can buy that.
Yeah, sure. But again,
Doobie-
like these, just to sum this point up for me, if these historical facts are true as they're presented from PhDs, and then they're completely theorized and like blown way out of proportion.
Oh shit! Fuck. All right.
Of like presenting this as just because this historical fact is true, this depiction must be.
Okay.
Doobie, would your disagreement with the show change if the PhDs legitimately believed that this was like a reality?
I would have an issue with them not presenting the other side.
So
I think
if
when
they,
you're making like
pretend I was a PhD, like it's like I had the confines of a show. I only could do it in this side. I didn't have the ability to present the other side. Am I still wrong? Because
yeah,
like,
I don't think it's that hard to add in.
The other side was
possibly.
presented for all this time.
Literally, you could just add possibly. It's a possibility that this is blah 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 based on that. Like it's not that hard.
Okay, all right, because I'm still like I'm doing it with the closed captioning, but because like I know the PhD explains because this is where it sounds like because he explains social construct, right? Explains that the like what we consider gay today is not like gay then, right? Or like that idea, that premise, right? And that he's doing a lot of things, right? Abraham Lincoln is the one I'm talking about. He's doing a lot of things where he's could possibly be gay, right? But he said that for like a minute, and then he went on for the rest of the thing, and then it was like entertainment about Abraham Lincoln, how he's spending weirdly a long amount of times with other men,
which would
right? Or what they would consider.
fulfill Kobe's requirement, right? Kobe was talking about how like gay today isn't gay back then, right? So if that's what he's saying, I haven't seen that piece, right? So that's it. What he's saying is actually like fulfilling what Kobe was saying, and that we shouldn't use our context on the past, right? Because the way they looked at it makes us different.
Anytime you do that anytime you look at history,
they say,
you want to look at that time.
Okay, I just had a problem with the binary part. Like,
unless they're
the rest of,
implying
like the gay stuff's whatever.
Unless they're implying that not gay back then or gay today doesn't equal gay back then, means that like gay people back then were way hornier and were just like crawling all over each other in bed and whatnot, like that Abraham Lincoln doing with his roommate. Then like I don't see how that like they've done anything useful with that information. Right? So what they've done to make the claim that Abraham Lincoln is gay is basically he had letters between himself and his like best friend, right, where they talk about missing each other and whatnot. And from that, they've inferred that, oh, this must mean that he's gay somehow. Right? They state he definitely had sex with this person. They have like things with them in bed and all this kind of shit, right? And they play it up as if it's like a porno with a guy looking at Abraham Lincoln's ass and Abraham Lincoln spanking himself. Like
How long is the video? Is it like 8 minutes?
It's literally
that segment's like 8
So
minutes.
it's literally just to get people interested in history, whether it's
no, it's lying to people about history.
It's
Yeah,
8
there are
minutes
plenty.
in the
There are
video
plenty of
that-
actual. There are plenty of LGBT people that actually existed or still exist in history that made massive contributions to the world. Right? Why not just focus on them? Like, and they do with some of these people, right? Like that.
They're trying to get people hooked on history and interested in it.
Harvey Milk was a gay guy. That's great that they're highlighting him. A lot of people don't know about him. Right? But why throw in the people that aren't gay, aren't non-binary, and say this person was definitely non-binary because she dressed like a man?
Like, why would you make Superman black? Superman wasn't a character
So-
made to be black, right?
So in a lot of these like situations, like when we look at the like personal lives of historical figures, we don't really know a lot about these people. We didn't have like CNN coverage, and if you really think about it, we only know so much about like public people even today. Like a lot of like the way that we view history in a lot of cases is like the individual opinions of groups of historians that all come to a consensus and agree about things. And I could see that, hey, there is like some coalition of a bunch of historians that feel a particular way about these things. Some of these things are definitely a stretch. Some of them are like more easy to make these comparisons. And I think that in these situations, like where we're talking about Abraham Lincoln, they're like, hey, we need to do something that's like extremely out there because this is going to get people like talking about the show and get people on Twitch like riled up and do like debates about it to like get people like publicizing the show and whatnot. And so whether or not it's entirely accurate, people are going to form their own opinions about all of this stuff. But a lot of the time, the only way that we have any of the ideas that we have about the personal lives of historical figures is because people have kind of looked at a bunch of things and gone, yeah, this is what we kind of think was going on.
But there's a difference between doing that and then an actual established historical consensus, right? So, like the article that we linked to at the very start of this had talked about the idea of Abraham Lincoln being a homosexual has widely been discredited, right? Like it looks like you really just kind of like printed off an idea of like, if you want to use this to get people interested in queer history, you've got better choices and it would be a better conversation and truthful. It would be, a hell of a lot better to use truthfully 100% known homosexual characters.
Yeah, there's a lot of information on people out there too.
Not as flashy though.
Right.
Yeah, why don't we? Why don't we? Why don't we try Dan here, who works as a historian. So, all right, Dan, please.
Yeah, I'm not specifically like study Abraham Lincoln or specific figures. I do study in the era though. There were a lot. I think just simply the video has been taken, obviously has been taken very much out of context. To certain things like queer queens, to like Abraham Lincoln sleeping in the bed with a guy or whatnot. It's not to my effect that I don't exactly seem to evidence that he has maintained such a relationship throughout his life. There has much more direct evidence of the president before, such as Buchanan being gay, than probably Lincoln would ever be. Because, like, for example, Buchanan lived with a man that he was really close to for many years, even after his presidency.
And he was like the one of few bachelor presidents, right? Like he wasn't.
Yeah, he
and
was.
wasn't married. Yeah.
So I actually need to get going, but
Yeah, and in using this context to talk about things like with Joan of Arc and all the other figures that happen throughout history, I think is very much, I think, could be leading to directions to the whole context of even during that period. Like, it's I mean, we could talk about like figures that for sure were like 100% gay that have better contextual evidence to them as to the characters, such as Frederick the Great of Prussia, which was 100% gay, like no doubt about it. But his being gay is entirely in the basis to his character. His character mostly is being like a mastermind when it comes to his the army that he controlled, to a lot of the other things he has done throughout his career. And we could probably talk about much other people who are similar to those figures or lifestyles or whatnot. But it does kind of sour this whole taste on the like end up becoming creating this different message to this modern context, to even back as mentioned back then, and the idea of homosexuality were very much different to what we can say now. It's very, very different.
So if it's an 8-minute video and they're trying to get people interested in history and doing their own research, because they're not going to tell you everything in 8 minutes. So kind of my take on this is it's kind of just a gateway to get people into history that may not be interested in history in the first part, trying to get people on board in something that's
well, you wouldn't want to use lies to get people interested in such a subject.
I think there was way better examples just than to do the pop culture icons as Lincoln. There's many examples of like Chinese emperors, specifically I think with one of the Han emperors wanting to give away his kingdom to his lover, like the whole entire empire, the Han Empire to his whatnot, to other figures throughout time that have directly have much about it. Even if to the message of like being gay is entirely the whole part of the character and end up not being exactly a great ruler and whatnot, I think it's a better choice to give the whole context of establishing a person to their character being a ruler as there was during that era than to simply go and talk about the good things that they did, or just specifically do ones that were specifically great people in their time.
Okay, yeah. I don't think that. So I don't want to go and say that this is lies. They have gathered historians who they have gathered a bunch of historians who are staking like their careers, right? Like they're going on there and saying, hey, we have some evidence here that goes to show that many of these people weren't cis hetero, right? I think I think the worst that you can say is that they should make it clear that they're are making inferences on the past, inferences on like what these individuals might have been, right? Because, and which is what historians do all the time, they're just making inferences. Like you if you have only a few historical sources and also all from like one perspective, like the perspective of the upper class, well then sure, you can, it's not like it doesn't mean anything, but that doesn't mean everything. So we can only make guesses at to certain points in the past. So so hold on, thanks. Yeah, so it's just, it seems like I think that what Kobe was saying previously about like in some of the ways that this show's depicting individuals, like in terms of the little skits that they're doing, that's spot on, and that might be problematic. But to simply make inferences about people who were in the past and having evidence to say, hey, they may not have been like everyone else, I think that's absolutely fine. But if they're saying necessarily that it's truth, that we definitely know that this pharaoh was definitely non-binary, I can't imagine they've gathered enough evidence to do that. But again, my problem is I've only seen the trailer of this thing, and so I can't make broad generalizations. But I'm fine with that kind of leap. The leap said, you know what, there's plenty of looking at the day, look at some of their writings, looking at it through a new light. It like these people may very well have been part of this community, or not this community. They may have engaged in behavior that we would not consider cis hetero. I think that's like the vaguest you can go, right? Because again, what was straight and what's gay changes within the cultural context. Like what we consider gay behavior and the gay identity didn't exist back then. So like gay engaged in non-cis hetero behavior, being as big as possible, I think it's okay to make differences there. I think that might be as much as irresponsible as they have been, but beyond that, I think the rest is fine. Like Crimson said, they're trying to get people into history.
I do definitely agree to the inference that you made about historians, when having a little bit of evidence, were able to make inferences and some occasions expand upon these sources, such as like these videos specifically about Lincoln and the pharaohs like of Egypt, which I can at least recall from at least my studies in at least Egypt, or at least from what I remember. There were at least a couple of them were like gay to non-binary or whatnot to.
Well, my understanding
But
was,
to finish about it, and I do think a lot of these things do help people get into history, and I'm applying upon it because I do think history is like a great field to study. I just don't like when it's taken to the far to make claims that like going the route like Ancient Aliens was like, what if this was true or whatnot? It's like then I kind of find that to end up becoming a bit more like ridiculous.
yeah,
Redhead?
my understanding for pharaohs, it was far more about this person is like a literal deity on earth. So if we take that and put it in the historical context of like what they were then, how they were viewed historically then, and they acted in ways that wouldn't be, heterosexual at that case, I could see why you would make the inference kind of like what's been talked about of like, oh yeah, these were queer people that had a desire to have homosexual sex. I guess.
Well, it really honestly depends when you're talking about, as you bring up Egyptian history. You're more talking about much of the later like new period where they end up being considered to be 1 foot in the divine and 1 foot in reality. That ends up becoming much later than it was, I would say, during the old period when you end up having like Khufu and the temples and all that. A lot of the stuff about in Egypt, there was a lot of myth making, specifically I think with like a lot of the gods being openly gay and all that.
There's a lot of reincarnation as well too. You got to realize that if someone came back in a spirit of a man or a woman, they might be groomed as a child to fulfill that role as they get older. So
I'm gonna jump in
certain
and just say,
occasions there has
Yeah,
been
bye,
like
Jacob.
women who
Thanks.
became
Have a good night, Jacob.
yeah, all right. Take
there's
care, everybody.
occasions where women who end up becoming pharaoh have to put upon taking a more of a masculine role and even to their image much later when they do become for or at least having both in the same time, to having that projection to their what is to them is not specifically just because
Sure.
of force is their role. It's more of like projection of their cultural norms of power and what add to be their projection of like rulership and such.
Sure.
It really is pretty complicated when getting to very nitty gritty details of era, but I mean, at least that's what I can recall from that. From Egypt.
Okay. Yeah.